Original A119 V1 versus A119 Mini. This comparison is going to be a little bit less formal than my regular videos because I'm just talking straight to the camera. This is unscripted. I don't really think a full formal review and comparison between these two cameras is necessary because I have the original A119 V1 and not the more modern A119 V3. The A119 V1 and A119 Mini are much higher of a jump in terms of generational gap, and I think that most people who have an A119 will have the V3 instead of the V1. That being said, I do still think it is apt to have at least some comparison between these two cameras because the V1 does have that older generation of image sensor, even older than the V3 actually, and as well it does have older technologies and a very similar form factor to the V3. So let's look at them side by side real quick, talk about the differences, and look at some driving footage. I hope that I can do this video without going back and doing a voiceover, using the internal camera audio from either the A119 Mini or the A119 V1. I know the Mini's internal microphone's pretty good in terms of picking up my voice. Even though it's not super bassy and rich, you'll at least be able to understand what I'm saying. I honestly, genuinely cannot remember what the V1 sounds like, so I'm going to splice that in here too. This is what the V1 sounds like, and then we're going to compare that to the A119 Mini. Check it out, it's everyone's favorite bridge, the Alex Fraser Bridge, and it's my favorite place to do these audio samples. Why? Well, we're going at a pretty fast speed, so this is what it sounds like when you're driving on the highway at about like 80 to 85 kilometers per hour. As well, there's lots of other traffic around me, lots of other noise, and it's kind of scenic to come over the bridge here and just go down towards the city. You've got that buildings in the distance, you've got kind of ugly industrial zone to be honest, but yeah, this is an audio sample. We're comparing the A119 Mini with the A119 V1. As well, there's lots of other traffic around me, lots of other noise, and it's kind of scenic to come over the bridge here and just go down towards the city. You've got that buildings in the distance, you've got kind of ugly industrial zone to be honest, but yeah, this is an audio sample. We're comparing the A119 Mini with the A119 V1. There is a large generational gap between these two cameras in terms of their frame rate and image sensor. So the A119 V1 operates at 30 frames per second with a 2K resolution, whereas the A119 Mini operates at a 60 frames per second with that same 2K resolution. The generational gap in terms of image sensor will be most noticeable at night, although as well you might notice a gap in terms of lens quality during the day. The original V1 sometimes had a little bit of decentering, blur off to one side or the other, which was sometimes worsened during hot sunny days when the lens would expand from heat. The A119 V3 did somewhat correct this, but I've noticed so far while using the A119 Mini, even on hot days, everything stays in focus. I honestly think that it's going to be pretty similar, just given the fact that they're both 2K resolution cameras. However, the Mini does have the advantage of the double frame rate. So for oncoming traffic, when cars are whizzing past, there is literally twice the opportunity for the camera to capture the frames. So in some instances where it's starting to get a little bit darker, the A119 Mini will try and maintain a faster shutter speed as well to compensate for the fact that it needs 60 frames per second versus the 30 on the A119 V1. The A119 V1 has been in my mom's car for the last 5 to 6 years, and it's been doing spectacularly, but I always have it set to 1080p at 30 frames per second because she doesn't really need that 2K resolution. What she needs is a camera that is going to just last long term without me interacting with it, without me having to format the memory card. I don't want to have to touch it. So I put it at a lower resolution so that the memory card lasts a little bit longer, that video lasts longer, because sometimes she'll tell me, oh, I saw this really strange thing happening back in 2 weeks ago, and with the camera set at that lower resolution, I have the opportunity to go back 2 weeks and just check the footage and see if something happened. But on that note as well, that lower resolution produces less heat, and the camera should just overall last longer. Unfortunately, the A119 Mini does not have the ability to do that in its current firmware. Instead of taking the whole video and compressing it down to a lower resolution, the A119 Mini crops in. So with a 1080p video, you're losing about a third of the frame and you're losing that super nice wide angle that comes with the dash cam that most dash cams have. So I'm just going to crop in here artificially in post-production and show you the difference between a wide angle shot at this traffic light and a nice close crop. So aside from the differences in lens quality, sensor quality, and I guess just general build quality changes, the other big difference with the A119 Mini is the addition of Wi-Fi and app control. That just means that you can use your phone to look at footage, change settings, and live preview the camera. The A119 Mini doesn't really need the screen that it has. It's a nice to have because sometimes the app can be a bit finicky to get it to connect and stay connected to the cameras, but for the most part, Viofo's app has had years of refinement and it seems to work as it should. The biggest difference in video quality, however, I suspect will be at night, so let's move to night footage now. I know it's not entirely dark out yet, but nonetheless, it is 10 p.m. at night, and we're just kind of driving around through the parking lot, getting a good idea of what the night footage compared between these two cameras is like. This isn't exactly an apt comparison. The A119 V3 would have been a better camera to compare to the A119 Mini, since at the time of filming, the V3 is still available. However, I figured nonetheless this would be helpful because this is two different generations of cameras. The original A119, I believe, is based on an OmniVision OV4689 sensor, although I'm sure when I go and fact check this video when I'm home, I'll be completely wrong. And the newer A119 Mini is based on a Sony Starvis sensor, similar to the A119 V3, but newer generation, you know. That's kind of an iterative change versus some of the other things that are more substantial, like doubling the frame rate to 60 frames per second, the addition of Wi-Fi and app connectivity. Those are the two real big ones. The downside of doubling the frame is that there's additional heat generated because of the processing power needed to encode that video. So the A119 V1 has half the frame rate and runs a little bit cooler than the A119 Mini. All that being said, they have done a pretty good job adding additional ventilation and trying to control the heat, so I expect the A119 Mini should last pretty well, especially compared to cameras that are based on batteries. But just overall, it is something to take into consideration when you are comparing the V3 and the Mini, as long as the V3 is still available, that it might actually be a little bit better in hot climates. Well, all of that being said, you can just take the A119 Mini, put it in 2K30 mode, and run it with half the power requirements. I suspect that setting it to 2K30 versus 2K60 will reduce the power requirement of the Mini by about 20 to 30%. It's not going to be exactly half, but that is substantial enough that if you live in a hot climate, it may be worthwhile to do that, just to prevent the camera from overheating on a hot summer day that's like 40, 43 degrees Celsius. Here in Vancouver, probably never going to be an issue, but down south, California, Texas, Arkansas, something like that, in the desert, yeah, you might have to do that. Alright, that's about it for the comparison video. I know this was a little bit less formal than I normally do, but I hope it was helpful anyways. I gotta get this camera back into my mom's car, because as I said, the A119 V1 has been in there for the last 5 or 6 years, and hopefully it will continue to be in there for another several years. If the V1's performance and longevity is any indicator of how the A119 Mini will perform, then this camera should last a very long time under the right operating conditions, as long as it's not too hot or abused too much. Unfortunately, with the Mini, you can't really lower the resolution at the current time to help with hotter climates, but you can lower the frame rate to the 30 frames per second modes, and that should help in terms of heat capacity. Hope this video was helpful. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.